Hello and welcome to the Beginner Drawing course. Now, throughout this course, I'm going to be showcasing all of the drawing principles you need to know to get started or improve where you're currently at. So whether you've been drawing for a couple years or you're a complete beginner just getting into drawing, I'm going to be giving you some invaluable tools and concepts and techniques that will allow you to not only create better art in a pretty succinct way, but also permit you to learn even when this course is over. Now, at the end of each of these videos, you'll be given an assignment, and I recommend wholeheartedly that you spend the whole week doing the assignment, as this is an 8-week course. What I would really do is recommend anywhere from a total of 7 to 14 hours throughout the week on any given assignment, and you will get so much from it that it will cause you to basically be amazed at your progress if you just follow along and apply the concepts that I'm going to be showing you. We're not only going to be talking about drawing, but we're going to be talking about how to take in information, process it, and then apply it and understand it. Because knowledge without the application can never be wisdom, and we want to be wise when it comes to our drawing. So let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Taylor Payton. I'm the founder of Power Painters, and I've been a freelance illustrator and concept artist for going on 3 years now. I just want to let you know that you can learn to draw. It's like learning musical scales or arithmetic. You really don't need any talent, you just need an interest. Your interest will cause you to think, feel, and act in harmony when it comes to leveling up your ability to draw. I'm really just like you. I have an appreciation for art and I want to get very good at creating my own art. So I drew all the time as a kid, but I never got much better until I really started to apply myself and learn these concepts. So I really am just here to show you all of these concepts that have really helped me along the way and to kind of guide you through the process of learning to draw. And as you go, you'll start to develop your own methods and understandings and means, and that's perfect because you have to sort of tailor what I'm giving you precisely to your own benefits and your own purpose because that's how you're going to get the most out of it. So I really just wanted to drive the point home that once you learn to draw, a whole new world of possibilities opens up for you. You can create worlds with something as simple as a pencil. Drawing, I see it as sort of a language. It's a visual language, and in this course, I'm not only going to show you how to speak it, quote unquote, but how to teach yourself even beyond the introductory series that this course is, basically. So I'll start with this. The way to learn to draw the way to learn the most while drawing is to acquire information, process and parse it, and put it into practice, all while having fun. So almost like getting into a childlike state of mind when you're drawing. Not childlike in that you want to scribble all over the page, but childlike in that you don't bring any of your limiting beliefs or ideas to the table. You simply take in the information and assume you can already do it, and then practice, practice, practice until it starts to become a reality. So the best way to take in information is verbally and visually. So writing notes helps as well. Then you want to process the information, so you want to think about it deeply, and you want to relate the concepts that you learn to as many things you already know as possible. So this increases your understanding and retention of what is basically being shown to you. Then finally, you put the knowledge into earnest practice. You take some time to apply the concepts pragmatically and do it with focus and mindfulness. So once you take in the information and you process it, then it's time to do the actual drawing with what you've learned. Because then you're taking what you've learned and you're applying it, and then it becomes real. It actually has prompted action from you. And once you get to that point, then you're already on your way, basically. So don't forget to have fun though. Talk to yourself in ways that are motivating and not judgmental. Encourage yourself with praise and positive discipline. So as I said earlier, I'll be here to guide you through this process every step of the way. So basically, as I've just kind of primed you with the idea of taking in information, processing that information, and then applying it, that's going to be a strong theme throughout this course, so I want you to remember that. What you're seeing on the screen now is just a quick sketch I did for my imagination. As of this recording, I literally just got back from a life drawing session from a live nude model just about an hour and a half ago, and so I'm actually doing what I was just speaking to you about. I drew from life, which was reference. I took in information, and now I'm applying it to make sure that I cement the concepts into my brain so my visual library grows. Because even though I'm going to show you throughout this course how to use reference and also how to go with much more diligent study methods, it's really, really fun to be able to make stuff up from your mind and be able to release things without necessarily having to Google every 10 seconds, because that can get kind of painful after a while. So, in essence, I'm going to show you a couple basic things about drawing and line work and some of the more technical aspects that are going to be very easy to understand before we move on. So let's get down to those real quick, and then we will talk about how to actually start a drawing if you're just starting out, or maybe if you want a new permutation or a new process to go about it, if your drawings haven't really satisfied you in the past. So let's get started. So it's always good to start with sort of a linguistic example, I feel, because if we can understand the language, then we can further understand the concept. So what does drawing actually mean? Well, etymologically, drawing appears around the 1200s, and the spelling was an alteration of Old English, which was dragan, or to drag, to draw, to protract. So in essence, we're just dragging our medium across the paper or the surface, and that is allowing us to protract and draw out our concept, whether that be a study or a sketch or what have you. So now that we know where drawing comes from and what it is, we can start to talk about some of the drawing concepts and fundamental things that you need to know when it comes to drawing. So when it comes to drawing and you're just starting out, you tend to kind of just wing it, as we do with most things. But there have been several, okay, lots and lots of generations before us, and a lot of them became masters at the craft of drawing. So if you take into account what they tried to teach us and what they used in their works, you can begin to understand things a lot faster and build upon them, as opposed to trying to figure everything out yourself. One of the best ways to do this is just to look deeply at stuff or to read material on drawing that's been written by people like Andrew Loomis or Harold Speed. Now, since this isn't either of those very fine gentlemen's courses, I'm just going to give you a brief overview on some of the aspects of drawing that you can be using and thinking about when you're working on your drawings. So we want to think about straight or vertical lines, lines that just run up and down. They're great for measurement, they're great for solidity and strength, and we want to use vertical lines wherever appropriate, just like all the other different types of lines and marks that we're going to be talking about. Now next we have the concave or convex curved lines. So concave just means it's going in, and convex means it's pushing out. So if you're looking at something like, let's say a head, for example, some parts are going in, some parts are going out, some parts are going to be straight vertical, some are going to be straight horizontal, and you have to use a mixture of straight and curved lines in order to fully bring across this aesthetic beauty that is waiting to be drawn out from the image. That's why we need to know the straight lines and the curved lines in order to juxtapose them against one another when we're sketching. Also, if you look around the corners or the contour, the outside of any given object, you'll see that the lines are either straight, concave, convex, or they're horizontal. If they're not any of those, it's most likely that the lines are actually angled. So angled lines can be straight or curved, but they give a sense of either tipping or dynamism. They're really good to use if you want something that's dynamic and actiony, or something that seems like it may fall over. Regardless, we use it as a means to angle out instead of using something like a straight line or a vertical line. We also want to talk about line weights or thickness. Now, line weight or thickness is just basically saying how thick or thin a line is. And as you begin to progress in your drawing, you're going to be using a variety of different lines, different thicknesses of those lines as well, because we want to make sure that we know the tools of line that we can use. Now, Thick lines are really good for bringing things forward toward the viewer, toward the point of view. The thinner lines are good for having stuff fall back. Now you can use one weight across the whole drawing, but that can seem somewhat stale sometimes if you don't know how to apply the technique properly. So it's a really good idea to go ahead and mix up your line weights for various effects, and we'll be getting into some of that later. Another thing I want to talk about is flow. Now, flow is what I like to dub the essence of movement or motion in an image. Now, even though when we're drawing, we're working on something that is essentially static and two-dimensional, we want to keep in mind the flow, because the flow is going to be what permits us to make it feel like it has motion, to make it feel like it's alive. Now, flow is sort of a nebulous concept if you're not quite used to thinking about it. But you want to start minding where the flow is, because then you can see where you can place your marks to accentuate the flow of the form or the curve of a spine. So I just want you to think about flow and what it means to you and how you can start to implement it in all of your work. Because one of the biggest things that you're going to be overcoming as a beginner or as an artist who is not as developed yet is making sure your stuff doesn't seem stiff. And if you don't think about flow, then stiffness is kind of the counterpart to it, and that occurs a lot more frequently. For example, if you don't have light, then darkness is the default, and I feel like flow is just the other end of the spectrum. So you need to understand what is stiff versus what has flow. So that's a really good concept that we will also be elaborating on later. The next thing I want to talk about is shading or mark making. Now, in that quick sketch in the beginning, you saw me doing some of this, and that's just using, instead of thinking about line, we're thinking about the shade or the shape and making marks that are going to push and pull the forms, which is going to give it that three-dimensional look. You can make a bunch of lines that are right next to each other in varying degrees of closeness or separateness. You can crosshatch, or you can keep them so close that it just becomes one big sort of movement or motion. Making marks on the page is what we're going to be thinking of when we're drawing, because most people think, oh, I want to draw that hand, or I want to draw this hair, when really we're just making marks on the page that are making people think that we're drawing a hand or that we're drawing hair, when really we just know the marks that look like hair together, or we know the marks that make up a hand. So mark making is a very important concept, and I want you to start considering everything as a mark or a series of marks, as opposed to what its label is, like a shoulder or a nose. Think of it as a series of marks. And next I just want to talk about overlap and crossing over. So like we talked about with line weights and thickness, overlapping and crossing stuff is a lot like using depth to push things forward and pull things back. Like I said, thick things tend to come forward toward the viewer, thicker lines, and thin lines tend to fall back, and if we cross them over, we can have the dimensional effect that we're going for, because you don't want your art to appear flat unless you deliberately are making like a mosaic or something. You want things to have a pop to them, to have form and volume and depth. And another huge mistake, not huge, but another prominent mistake in many beginning artists is their stuff has a very flat look to it. And we're going to discuss why that is and how to overcome it. So now that you have an idea of all these vertical lines and horizontal lines and their thickness, and if they're curved or if they're flowing or angled, or what marks to make, you now understand some of the tools that we're going to be using throughout this drawing course. Even with just these simple tools, you literally have an infinite amount of possibilities when it comes to arranging them and drawing and getting the most out of your medium. Let's look at some actual drawings so that we can get the tools applied and see them in action. So now that we've taken the time to learn some of the tools of drawing, I'm going to do a quick sketch that's going to demonstrate pretty much all of those tools and how you can think about using them for your own stuff. Now, as I'm drawing, keep in mind that I'm using concepts that are far beyond what we talked about with just the tools, but I still want you to notice where I do utilize them and how you can actually start to work them into your own process as well. So what I'm starting with is just a super basic head sketch, very simple shapes, lining stuff up based on where I know it goes, and just kind of going from there. Already I have a good mixture of lines. I've got some straighter lines, I've got some curved lines, and you can see that I'm about to infer some shadow, make some marks. And this is really just the stage one sketch. There's a lot of refinement to be done past this point. This is just to establish all of the features and the general feel, because as you're going to learn in drawing, it's really a process of having placeholders and then getting those placeholders to read like a finished drawing. And we're going to make that distinction as we go along here with this just quick little demo. I didn't have any sort of deep prepared concept. I'm just going based off of my rote understanding of what I just talked about with these various types of line. All right. So this is enough of a sketch to actually move on to a more finished version. So I'm just going to keep this here by copying it over and starting a new layer. And then I'm going to lower the opacity on the new layer and just draw over it with a different color and make it darker. So let's talk about those kind of lines that we were just discussing. Here is a quick angled line. It's also a little bit more curved, so it has a flow to it. And now I'm going around the contours and thinking about how I can best emphasize the forms using those types of line. Now, you're going to make a lot of bogus lines even as a more seasoned artist. So it's best just to kind of get a quick idea or a couple practice strokes down and then to elaborate on those and fix them up and finesse them by kind of going back and forth between drawing and erasing. I'm just kind of running the contours here. Very simple motions. Now, this line actually came out just a tad bit convex, and I'd like it to be more concave, if not just straight, so I'm going to redo this one, and that's looking more to my liking. Now I know I'm going to need another neckline around here. We're going to have to put our marks back in to infer that shadow as well. Now, I'm not going to connect these two lines. I'm going to use what's called a lost and found line, which is something we didn't actually discuss, but it's good to put it into practice anyway. And that's not having the lines actually touching, but just inferring that there's a connection by having them meet each other and then having negative space in between. So from there, I can actually start to kind of shade in a little bit and then soften the connection. Then I have that sort of back and forth rapport that will help us have a variation in our forms. So for lips, you typically want to use a lot of curvature. Lips are not very straight, save for perhaps one or two of the lines. And as I'm going, I'm just making some marks along the side. And then I'll go ahead and shade the plane under the nose because my light's coming from the top here. Now we're just going to sketch in some quick eyes. And like I said, I'm not thinking of the eye as I'm drawing it, I'm thinking of the shapes that make up that eye. And then I'll follow suit. It's good to do eyes one after the other so that you can have a better chance of making them symmetrical and looking like they belong on the same face. And then we'll just get some quick small eyebrows in. All right. So as I'm going in and cleaning stuff up here, I'm being a lot more precise and a lot less loose than I was with my initial sketch, simply because I have a clearer direction on where I'm now heading. And that's okay to have a couple iterations of sketches to get what you need down before you actually start on the final. A lot of times, as you're just beginning, you think that the one you're drawing when you start is the one you're going to end up with. But whether you're working traditionally or digitally, it helps a lot to redraw it several times. Now, I just want to point out real quickly that I'm using some very good rhythms and flowing lines, concave and convex lines, to go with the hair here. I just had a general idea of what I wanted the hair shape to be, and so I kind of run with that as I progress through the sketch here. I want to separate the bangs, so I'm using some more long lines. And then that ear is actually a little out of place as well, so we know it's just a placeholder. We can go in and correct it. The ear is always going to line up with the bottom of the jaw, the bottom of the earlobe. And the bottom of the nose should be approximately in alignment with the bottom of the earlobe as well. That's just another quick measurement that you can use as you're progressing in your drawing. I'm just going to throw in a couple quick marks here that are going to read like freckles. And you see I'm not actually drawing freckles. I'm just making marks, and those marks are reading like the portrait I'm drawing here is freckled, when really I'm just making some marks on the canvas, and that is giving the viewer the idea that there are freckles here. And that's why I say that art is a language, because really we're speaking to our viewers, and we want to learn how to say things in a way that's understandable. And we're going to be doing that by using the tools that I talked about earlier. So now I'm going to make some quick shading here for the band that holds the ponytail together. And that ponytail shape is kind of nice, but let's see what else we can kind of do with it. And if I can get it down more succinctly than what I had. All right. So let's block off the bottom and just do some quick shading here. Very brisk shading. We're just blocking off areas so that we know what is dark and what is light, and that helps us get another degree of versatility when it comes to our image. And now I'll just slowly move down toward the rest of the portrait here, and I'll just make some shapes. In the next lesson, we're definitely going to be talking about a lot of shapes, simply because shapes are the building blocks that we're going to be formatting our lines in. Line kind of comes first because we drag them out and protract them and use them to draw, but you can also draw with shape. And once you understand how to draw not only with line but also with shape, then you are advancing at a very quick pace, because making the distinction between what is a line and what is a shape is good, but to be able to apply both of them when it comes to your art is what's really going to showcase the most progress. Because an artist who is more versed understands their shapes better, and thus can make better marks, can use their lines more appropriately, and just has a plethora of other options available to them. Alright, so since I've basically gone in and roughed in every aspect of this sketch that I need to, what I'm going to do next is just close it off quickly. we're going to emphasize some parts and just do a quick sweep, a quick additional cleanup. So how I'm going to emphasize certain parts is I'm going to make them darker and occlude them. So this is the weight of lines that you're seeing here. I'm weighting the lines so that they come forward more toward the viewer. And I'm also going in and making marks that read as occlusions, which means they're in shadow. And go ahead and taper and fix up the jawline a little bit. And maybe we'll shade this in as well, just a tad, some very light shading. And I suppose we're going to need a shadow under the nose as well, so I'll mark in where I want that to be, and then just go ahead and make some quick shadows. Alright, and then probably one for the lower lip since that's protruding too. Alright, this is really coming together for a nice little demonstration. Let's label off all the different aspects that we talked about, or as many as we can recall right now so that we can use them later and cement them further. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch to red here. So first we have our straight lines, our horizontal lines, our vertical lines, and our angled lines. And as you can see, we have those here in many places. We have our straight lines, we have our more angled lines, and we even have our more horizontal lines as we move toward the top here. So we have different kinds of lines that are now balancing each other out and creating a sense of space. And we used them in a format that allows us to have a stronger drawing, a more reinforced drawing. Next, let's talk about some of the curvier lines. And we have that as well with the hair. We have a curvier line around the corner here, and it's typically used for hair shapes, but we also have this curve that runs down the side of the face here, which leads into a straight line. So not only have we utilized our straight lines, but we used our curve lines as well with the concave, convex principle that we talked about just a little bit earlier. We also used our mark making, and that's fairly obvious. We've done it underneath the chin here, all the way down the neck to the shoulder, underneath the ponytail, and we could do some under the bust too if we wanted. But since this is just for demonstration purposes, I think you guys get the idea of what it means to make those marks. We also did some very light mark making for the orbicular sockets of the eye, and mark making for the shadows of the nose and the lower lip. So another thing we did is we overlapped our lines in certain areas. For example, we have this jawline overlapping the lines beneath it. We've also got these lines overlapping the face, so you know that they're ahead as opposed to behind things. This line overlaps the hairlines here, so the cheekbone we know is in front of things. And we're using overlap predominantly to sell depth. We want to make sure that we have the dimensionality to our work. So that's pretty much most of what we talked about with the mark making. The various types of line and the different line weights are pretty prevalent around this sketch as well. So now you see these used in action on a very quick sketch. I want you to stop and quickly try some of your own so that you can cement these principles further. Use your horizontals, your verticals, your diagonals, your curves, and make some marks along some of those different forms that you're going to be drawing on so you can get used to using these types of line. Now, moving forward in the last part of this video lesson, you'll be receiving your first week's assignment, which will also prepare you for week 2's lesson and assignment, because everything flows into each other and we're going to build upon these concepts as we go. Get ready and I'll see you there. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed the review so far. I'm going to be giving you your assignment now. So for week one, we're going to be using the tools and types of line demonstrated, and you're going to be studying from any photos, movie stills, masters, or live models that you wish. Traditional and digital mediums are both welcome. The reason for this is it's going to prime you for the following lessons to come, where we'll be getting more into depth on how each of the drawing practices that I showed you today will aid you into tapping your latent artistic power and just watching your skills grow. So don't feel limited to use only the tools I demonstrated. Those were just the very basic rudimentary ones that are just getting you started on your drawing journey, or maybe helping giving you that constructive edge that you needed to start to have more of a solid feel to your drawing. Welcome to the final part of the beginner drawing course week 1 video. I'll be giving you your assignment now. So basically, using the tools and types of line that were demonstrated, you can study any photos, movie stills, masters, or live models you wish. Traditional and or digital mediums are actually both welcome. This basically is going to prime you for the following lessons to come, where we will be getting more into depth on how each of these drawing practices will aid you in tapping into your latent artistic power. So the lines and the concepts that I showed you right away are going to be the ones that are going to be very useful for allowing you to construct and understand things visually, at least at this basic rudimentary stage where you're just learning to make marks on the page and get a feeling or a semblance of turning those marks into something like a head or a car, you know? So just don't feel limited to the ones that I demonstrated. You can invent your own marks. Just make sure you're doing it consciously, with conscious attention, and constructively. So you're using them in a way that is constructive and making the image come together rather than pulling it apart. So 1 hour of practice each day is the minimum for these exercises for 7 days. I must stress this, do not miss a day, because the momentum is what's important here. You want to get into the habit of drawing every single day, whether it's for an hour or 4 hours. So this is how the artists that you got to know, that you admire, get very, very good, by drawing every single day. If you want to be proficient, then having a daily drawing practice is absolutely optimum. Cannot stress this enough. So students who want to go faster or advance faster in their skill level will be going up to 4 hours a day. And 4 hours is a really good cutoff point, because any more than that and you'll start to get pretty tired. You won't be retaining as much information, won't be learning as much, and at that point you're only getting almost the rote mileage out of it. So you're still getting something, but once you breach the 4 hour barrier, you kind of start losing balance in other areas of your life for most of us. So if you have the time, feel free to put in more than 4, but 4 is the optimum point per day. So if you wanted to go faster, then 4 hours is what I recommend. So once again, the object of these exercises is to choose figures, landscapes, or items like a vase or a pen, and to examine those visually and apply the fundamental drawing tools too. So look for shape, lines, contour, and flow. Construction and a feeling of space is key. So I've gone ahead and provided a ton of resources in the downloadable PDF, as well as in the description box of this very first week's video if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can even go ahead and download the PDF that came with this package if you are an actual student of the course already, in which case thank you very much. But yes, this is the first week's assignment, so it doesn't matter how many drawings you do, as long as you do drawing every single day. You can choose whether you want to do it from any of these categories. I highly recommend that when you start out, do it from live models, or do drawings from life in a sketchbook, or just look out your window if you're on a tablet. From life is probably the most essential one, but any of these will definitely do in leveling you up. So thank you for taking part in the beginner drawing course. Now remember to draw every single day for the coming 7 days. If you want, there are a couple links in the description box or the downloadable PDF where you can post your work and hopefully ascertain some feedback from your fellow power painters. That about wraps us up for week 1. So thanks again for watching, have fun with your assignment, and I look forward to seeing what some of you guys do. Happy drawing! I'll see you next week with a new lecture and a new assignment. Let's keep leveling up.